This is a little closer look at the vacuum equipment. This is my resin trap slash vacuum chamber. Allows you to build up a good head of vacuum, um, which is when you're starting an infusion, you're going to pull a lot of the air that's trapped in your laminates out, so having a good sized vacuum helps a lot. The control device is very simple. The black wire is power to the pump. Um, the beige wire in is the power from the socket. We have a vacuum gauge. There's a one-way valve here. This is the MAC valve. We have a filter and we have a small reservoir. Up here is the actual vacuum switch itself, which is turned on and off by this relay based on the input it gets from the switch. So if you had your switch set at say 25 inches of mercury, once it hits 25 it would signal the relay to cut off the power and stop the pump. It's a very simple operation. The MAC valve, I believe, is important in ensuring that the power is switched properly. It's connected to the relay as well, so it's measuring the pressure at the head here instead of the pressure in the line that the switch has. The filter speaks for itself. It keeps moisture and schmutz, etc. Out of your system. This small reservoir helps when the pump is starting, so it doesn't have to start against full vacuum that's in the system. The pump only has to start with what's in the small reservoir, so it's a little easier on your equipment. And again, once this is set up, you can set it and leave it overnight. It will come on if there's a demand for vacuum, or if you've got a good seal, it won't come on at all. I've already run up the vacuum once on the setup, which I've now mounted in the garage. The pump is up on a shelf out of the way. It's exhausted outside. The Joe Woodworker vacuum control unit set up, and the reservoir is installed. So right now I'm setting at about 28 inches of mercury, which is less than a perfect vacuum, but it's more than good enough for our purposes here. Too much vacuum can leave you with a dry laminate, because it will suck all the vacuum or all the epoxy right out. So I'm going to show you how this works. So I'm going to take the vacuum off. And you hear the pump come on now. The vacuum is dropping. I'm going to cut the vacuum off now. It will slowly climb until it hits 28 inches, and then the controller will shut it down. That's all there is to it. And with this setup, it will stay like that as long as you have a perfect vacuum. It probably won't have to come on again. But in a full layup of a part, you may have a small leak. Once the pressure drops to about 26 inches of mercury, it will kick back on again, and again pull the laminate down to 28. This way you can infuse a part and essentially walk away from it, and you don't have to bother until the next day. You can count on the system from keeping the vacuum up. You don't have to worry about losing a vacuum and losing your layup. All sorts of good things like that. If I remember correctly, the whole setup was probably about $60 or $70 US. And if you're those of you that are familiar with vacuuming parts and boats and stuff like that, this is amateur hour for you, but this is how we'll make a lot of the smaller parts. Got a bit more room to work now. I've finished doing all the fairing and sanding I'm going to do on this rudder. As you can see, I've got it hanging from some changed from the ceiling of the boat shed. This is the way we'll infuse it. I've wiped it down, blown it off with compressed air. It's ready to have the first layer of reinforcement put on. I've never done this before, so it might get a little bit tricky, but I think it will go fairly easily, so stand by and we'll see how this works. This is the first layer of reinforcements that are going on the rudder. It's just held on there with a very conservative coat of 3M Super 77. My lucky third hand. I use it a lot on the inside of the hull. Doing it alone, you really don't have any choice. But being a part that's infused, it won't affect it at all. I've done a few resin infusions on small projects before, and I've used it, and I've never had an issue with it. So I'm just going to finish wrapping, and then I'll trim around the edges where it needs to be folded over. It's going to have pretty good overlap. Except for right there. So this is attempt number 2 at the rudder. The first time I did it, I used 18-ounce glass. I wasn't happy with the way that it wrapped on. Of course, I manhandled it quite a bit, which twisted it all out of shape, so I don't have any 18 left. The next up I have is 22-ounce, which is even stiffer. So we're going to give that a shot and see if we can't get this thing wrapped up in glass before we put the carbon fiber on it. So I'm going to try and set the bottom edge with a little 3M Super 77 and work my way out from the center to get it pulled properly out to the corners. Last time I did it from the top up, or sorry, the top down, and I had to end up pulling it all out of shape, which I want to try and avoid this time. So a few clamps help. I have to trim the corners around the rudder stock. Even though this fabric is heavier, it looks like it might actually work well. I gave myself a lot more extra on the outsides for trimming. That was the one thing I did wrong the last time as well, and the reason I had to manhandle it was to try and make it cover. This time I won't have to do that, so I think it's going to work a lot better. I will have to cut darts on all the corners, but that's to be expected, especially in a fabric that's this heavy. The downside is where the layers overlap, and they will overlap. There's going to be quite a bit of fairing involved. I really hate that, but I don't have much of a choice. So here goes. That actually went better than the first time. I guess I learned something. Hopefully I pass that on if you ever try this. If not, pay somebody to build your rudder for you. This boat actually came with a rudder, but they had fabricated the rudder shaft as well. It was one single piece, and which meant I would have had to have dug a 4-foot hole underneath the boat just to get the rudder into it. Instead, I opted for the flanges that can be bolted together, so the rudder can be taken out without having to dig holes in the ground. That was the reasoning behind that. So I'm just going to turn off the camera. I'm going to fold this all over and cut the darts, and then I'll flip it over and we'll come back and do the other side. There's the first side done. It turned out a million times better than the first attempt. I'm just going, I've got it all trimmed up. I'm just going to put the next layer on, and I'll come back and we'll get some close-ups of it, and I'll explain some of the things that I had to do to make it work. Getting a pretty good fit. I'm taking my time, trying to think ahead. Cutting these little darts was a pain in the ass. That was all done by hand, but that's not critical. This was the end of the roll, so there's some cello tape on it. Don't ask me why, I just noticed it now. Yeah, that's actually turning out pretty good. I'll get these flaps glued down and we'll come back and have a closer look. There's the first layer on. Try and get a little closer, you can see how it turned out. This side's pretty good, but that's because it doesn't have the open overlaps, but they're there on the piece underneath. You can probably make out the line right there. That side won't be bad to fare. The other side, a little messier, but I had a gap to fill. It's not a structural issue. It's just mainly to cut down on fairing. But that's a fairly pronounced seam that's going to be all the way around to be faired out. I'm not too worried about it. It's a rudder. I mean, how many people are going to see it? As long as it looks half decent. The water flows over it and it steers the boat. That's all I care about. Probably do the carbon fiber tomorrow. I'm pretty much whipped for today. Thanks for looking in. We appreciate all our new subscribers. Please like, share, and favorite our video, and spread the word. Thanks very much. Bye.